Hello, everybody. Did everybody have good lunch? I mean, I snuck out early and had breakfast, but. All right, so today we're going to talk about the two languages of inclusion in the workplace, hourly and salaried workforce. That's me. Who put that guy up there? I work in Texas City, Texas as a process operator. You can see what I wear at work. I carry the valve wrenches and work by the hour. I am a GLAD site leader. I am the United Way chairperson for our site. I am the union vice president for the Texas City Metal Trades. That's 9 different trade unions. I sit on the North American Inclusion Council, and I am on the College of the Mainland Board of Advisors. And I'll be interviewing for their Board of Trustees next week. Thank you.
Hey everyone, my name is Alex Papistrat. I'm located in Houston, Texas. Used to work in Texas City as well. I'm our global ERG leader for the company for our LGBTQ plus and ally employee resource group. My role is operations manager, so I work in the plant. Stephen and I worked in the same plant together for about 5 years. I support many local nonprofits in the Houston area community, as well as the nonprofits that Dow supports. And I didn't have as many titles, so I added also that I'm a cyclist. So I also, like I mentioned, I work in the plant, right? And I lead the ERG for the company. So like Stephen, do a lot of work in the plant. This is one of our turnarounds that we had recently in Deer Park. So you can kind of see us recognizing the group for good EH&S success. Just wanted to kind of give everyone a little bit of an overview of our operations globally for Dow. So we do have operations in every major region of the world. We also have our LGBT group in every major region of the world. You might have heard us talk about this a little bit earlier today. So we do have GLAD operations in Latin America, Europe, Middle East, and Africa, and as well as Asia Pacific. So Dow's a pretty big company. I know there's a lot of companies that are much larger from an employee standpoint, but we have about 35,000 employees globally. We have 10 ERGs within the company. We have had 10 ERGs for about the last 3 years. Globally, we have about 600 chapters for all of the networks and over 18,500 participants. So that's about over 50% of the company, which was one of our targets this year. And Stephen will talk a little bit about, the gap, right, between the hourly and the salary folks and the folks and those that participate in the network. So if we look at the numbers, right, it's a much larger percentage of those that are salaried folks that participate in the network. So our LGBT network, specifically GLAD, has about 45 chapters around the world and over 6,000 participants. So we're really excited about that number. We've grown quite a bit in the last 20 years. We've been part of O&Equal for over 15 years, given workshops and things like that, so a lot of external recognition. Our network really started it was a grassroots effort that our network started, right? About 22 years ago, a group wanted to form this network, right? So they worked with some of our executives and were able to form this network in 2000. Really, the intent there was really basic at that point, right? We didn't have any inclusive policies within the company, so there was a lot of frameworks that we had to develop, and we used O&Equal and other organizations as a sounding board and a group to really learn from others. And so we have, in that last 22 years, done a lot inside the company. We also partner a lot with nonprofits like O&Equal, Victory, and other organizations, PFLAG, globally. And then we also work at our regional levels to try and partner with groups there as well. So just high level, what do we do in our network? And Stephen will talk a little bit about this as well on how it relates to the plant. But we do a lot with our internal group, with whether it's employee experience, updating benefits and things like that, and also external advocacy, working with O&Equal, for example, in Brazil on statements of pro-LGBT equality. So we do work with a lot of our external organizations and other companies to form these business coalitions. We've been excited in the last couple of years doing a lot with customers as well. We partnered with Under Armour to do a Pride shoe campaign. Dow doesn't sell Pride shoes. We sell polyurethane to Under Armour that makes the Pride shoe. So you won't find our products on the shelf, but we're in most of the products that you're wearing right now. All right.
So we're going to do a real quick poll. I didn't do Menti or any of that fancy stuff. We're just going to go old school and raise our hands. How many executive level people do we have present in the room? So we got a few, all right. How many salaried employees do we have in the room? Ooh. That's what I thought. How many hourly people? How many people that are paid? Hey, there's my people right there. That's actually really impressive. I wasn't even expecting that many. So here's a few quick stats. Employees engaged in ERGs have a retention rate of 17% higher than those that are not. I bet your training and recruiting budget would, do with it would do well with a 17% decrease. You could do better things with that money. Employees engaged in ERGs are nearly 30% more productive. Employees that are more involved with ERGs are more innovative, and I know we've heard that all week long, but I made this before I got here. Hourly employees globally make up 55.5% of the entire workforce. So we're really missing out on more than half of all of employees. Hourly employees make up about 2% of ERG membership globally. So what are the two languages? Let's establish that first. We've got salary workers and hourly workers, and I think we can all agree that we know that the other side thinks differently and speaks differently. Salaried employees tend to have around-the-clock engagement. They're going to have, you guys are going to have your email on your phone. You're going to check your emails. You will communicate if you go, I've got to go out of the office or whatever. That's a common thing. Not so much for us. It's, see ya. Salaried workers tend to be more up to date on policy changes and any kind of management of change. Any of those things that happen, salaried employees are always up to date on them. You're my resource, so I appreciate it. Many of the hourly people don't even have access to emails. We don't work from the same workstations. Some don't have access to emails at all. The level of education tends to be college and graduate level education amongst salaried employees. High school and associates, yes, some of us do have degrees, but I went and got a English degree and I was the most educated waiter after that. Salaried employees tend to be more idea and innovation oriented, and hourly employees tend to be more action oriented. I think that's the whole point, right? So let's identify a few of the gaps. Hourly employees do not feel included. Diversity, equity, and inclusion itself is not inclusive. There's a strong us versus them mentality and cultural differences. So let's get to it. Hourly employees, a lot of times we don't even know we're invited. One of the number one things when I talk to hourly employees about employee resource groups, the number one response, what's an employee resource group? Everybody in this room, we know what they are. And I'm going to talk broadly across all employee resource groups, and we are going to talk specific about LGBT employee resource groups as well. So we're going to bounce back and forth, but when you grow membership to one or all, you grow membership to ours, right? So there's communications challenges. Events scheduled in a way that's not accessible to hourly employees. I cannot leave my production unit. Bank tellers cannot leave where they're at. Comcast is here. I used to be a Comcast installer, a field technician. And if you are out working in someone's home, you cannot leave and drive 60 miles back to the home base. If you are a Target employee, you can't leave the floor. It's going to depend on what industry you're in, but it's pretty broadly the same. Topics of the meetings tend to not be relevant for hourly employees. So what are we going to do about it, right? That's the question. What can we do? We don't just rely on email and posters for communication. It's easy to send an email. but I promise you they don't get looked at. It's easy to hang a poster in a break room, but also gets ignored. And the fact is, those are time consuming and they cost money for designing and printing on posters. You can save yourself a lot of money and just talk in person. When you have shift meetings or whatever it is, however it is you can communicate with the workers on your hourly workforce, talk to them in person because the message will get across that way. And since you're going to have multiple shifts, or just depending on how your shifts are broken up, we're all going to have multiple staggered shifts. We put an example. This is the shift this is my shift schedule, and I'm going to run through it real quick. I work 4 nights, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. I'm off 3 days. I work 3 days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I'm off 1 day. I work 3 nights, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I'm off Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Then I work 4 days, and then I get 7 days off. And I've been doing that for 10 years. So I can run through it real quick. I know my schedule, but when I try to explain it to folks, it's, wait, what? Yeah, it's a 28-day cycle, just, So the events tend to be scheduled in ways that are inaccessible to hourly employees. What are we going to do about that? We can schedule some of the events in our work areas. We work in control rooms, and so we've started having employee resource group meetings directly in control rooms. We are allowed to leave our production units for about 30 minutes at a time, and we can go on site to control rooms. You'll have to be a little more creative depending on what your business is, and I made this just as broadly as possible in speaking to like bank tellers and retail employees and just all the other people I spoke with. It sometimes may require having the same event twice. A lot of times there's a couple of places in the week where you're going to be able to have a majority and there's some overlap. So you may look at saying, okay, I'm going to have an employee resource group meeting. For me, it'd be a GLAD meeting. I'm going to have a GLAD meeting at shift change on Monday and Friday because I can catch all 4 shifts that way. The result of this is it builds morale, it resolves resentments, and it makes people feel seen and heard. You have about 30% of your hourly workforce, I promise you, that it just really wants to be involved in these efforts. Really, really want to be involved. And that makes us feel seen and heard.
Cool. Thank you, Stephen. So this slide should say tools to connect to our site. So Stephen's talked a lot about the different types of communications and that we have used, right? And just wanted to talk a little bit with the folks in the room about what we use to maintain that communication from our global steering team to our site leaders. Stephen is one of our site implementation leaders. So we, as I'm sure many of you have different online SharePoints and Teams or other types of programs there. We basically use that as a repository for different presentations. So I'm sure this presentation will get uploaded to our Dow SharePoint and stuff like that. But we have a lot of other resources as well, different welcome emails, things like that, videos. We might talk a little bit about replay videos and stuff like that. And these all are located on our SharePoint. We also do a lot of stuff around WhatsApp. So that's we use messaging to, especially at this event, right, to communicate with the different folks that are here. And I've actually used it in the plant. We use it in Texas City for the staff there to really communicate around stuff that's going on in the plant. Problem is you're 100% connected that time, so you may or may not like that. We do have a lot of quarterly educational meetings, so that was one of our 7 pillars was around education. And we pick different topics that are relevant within the community. We look at different workshops presented at O&ESummit and replicate that with our site implementation leaders and try and train everybody on the topics that are relevant. And then we post on our corporate Dow Connect and our Yammer different articles and things that we're really excited about being here at this event. So I'm sure something that'll be posted about as well. So Stephen reads Yammer and Dow Connect all the time.
I do.
Okay, but maybe not all the hourly employees. So we'll talk about that a little bit. I think this is going back to you, or I don't know.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you. I have to stand up and talk. I have this thing where I like to move a little bit, so I'm going to warn y'all now. that going forward, I'm going to touch on a few touchy things. I'm going to talk about politics. I'm going to talk about religion. And I'm going to use a dirty word, unions. So, sorry. So, what can we do about the relevancy issue? You know, one of the most effective tools in communicating with people when we don't know how to design something that's of their interest, and I don't know why we refuse to use it, because even I have refused to use it. I'll send a text or an email before I'll make a phone call every day. You know, the little chat, you know. You could just ask people, what do you want to know? I know it's a wild concept, but it's a really important one. You can just go and say, hey, what do you guys want to know? Because somebody asked me that one time, and we ended up putting together an event when we had PFLAG come, and we had people from different parts of the alphabet soup, and they were just able to ask questions. Called it Ask a Gay. It was it was educational, and it was interesting from both sides, right? So from my side, hearing, well, what are the questions going to be? And some of them, oh man, but you know what? I get it. All right, I get it. So that if you ask people what they want to know, they will tell you. We're going to build bridges, and we're going to close gaps of ignorance. Now, how are we going to do that? We're going to touch on that a little bit. Number one, you're going to allow open questions. And that's going to mean sometimes you're going to get questions that are pretty offensive. And expect that. We need to expect ignorance, but instead of having the counterpoint discussion and telling people why they're wrong, it's understand this is the line of thinking that they've been carrying with them for maybe 20 years, and they didn't have anybody to ask. And that built a resentment, and that built separation. And so when we say, what do you want to know? And they ask a question that comes off as offensive, but you meet it with compassion and understanding that, okay, I understand that this question's offensive, but we're trying to close the gap of ignorance. And you're not going to do that without understanding what it is the other side doesn't understand. It builds allies, and a lot of times it will help you. It'll help you connect with the people that didn't feel connected. They may be isolated in a community and surrounded by people that would be dangerous for them. But now you're giving this person an open platform. And that's the only way to close ignorance gaps is through education, compassion, and understanding.
And if I could share a quick personal story, Stephen, we didn't really talk about this, but when I started in the plant, I'm originally from New York, and I moved to New Orleans. I worked in a plant in St. Charles Parish. I was pretty intimidated by the folks that I worked with. They were from the river parishes. They weren't even from New Orleans. And obviously our, politics and things like that were probably slightly different. But I'll be honest, I was nervous about coming out in the plant, I was fortunate in the group that I started in that one of the people in that group was our LGBT network leader. So I immediately felt comfortable, within my primary organization. But when, how am I going to interact with the shifts, right? How are they going to respond to that? And I just remember, there was one guy, Jay, worked the board. When I said hi to him on my first day, he said, "I know who you are." That was it. Yeah, very intimidating. He's been there for 40 years, I think, at that point. But imagine that, how that makes you feel on your first day. I got to know the folks in the group. Greg Harrell was another operator that I worked with, and basically became like my best friend. We, would spend a lot of time outside the plant, and said, I've never met a gay person before. I'm going to be your strongest ally. You let me know how I can help you. If anyone messes with you, let me know. Mm-hmm. Seriously, it was pretty impactful. I was there for 7 years at that plant, and when I was leaving to come to Texas for the job that I came to here, Jay, the guy that talked to me on that first day, he came in, he shut the door and apologized. He said it's been weighing on him for some time, how he made me feel on that first day. So building those bridges and being honest and having compassion for everybody And having that dialogue is real. I was able to, together we changed the culture of that organization. So, and just a quick little about myself and my experience there. So, what tools and education do we have to support our organization? So, we rolled out in partnership with a few organizations an Ally to Advocate program. And this is really to engage, this was rolled out in our LGBT group, but we've extended it now outside of the GLAAD network to other ERGs as well, because you need to be an ally for every network, not just the GLAAD network. That term wasn't used as much within the company. So we really developed this program. We have pamphlets that we handed out, and we kind of created what's called a journeyship guide questionnaire. And this is like, where do you fit on that spectrum of an ally, right? Are you a new ally or are you a super ally? So you kind of answer a few questions and get to know where you are on that. We have some resources online, some examples of really awesome allies. And then we have different logos and stickers that we give to folks to kind of demonstrate where they are on that allyship journey. All right.
Thank you. I've been told by new employees that I'm intimidating also. And I like to ask them, why? It's probably not. So, diversity, equity, and inclusion is not inclusive. I know that seems a little shocking, but the thing that those of us in this room is we understand what the alphabet soup means. We also spend a lot of our lives professionally and personally in the pursuit of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we speak this language, we understand this language, but the first time someone said, well, what does the Q mean? What does the I mean? It's intersex. What's intersex? And it kind of dawned on me, I talk about this stuff like as if everybody knows what it all means. So first thing I want to hit on is understanding the difference between equity and equality. Equality is where we have a policy that applies to everybody, and that's equal. But equal is not always what's necessary. Equity is understanding that your hourly population may have different policy needs than your salaried population to participate in our employee resource groups. So that immediately this principle right here is going to make people not feel included, which is kind of the opposite of what we're trying to do here. It is intimidating at first. Often there's peer pressure and mocking, and when I stood up amongst my hourly people and I stepped into this role, that I got plenty of pushback. So I'll share a little personal story since I have some time. The way I became where I'm at now, it started as being misidentified as a gay man in a small, conservative, rural town in Dickinson. Not one that I grew up in. I moved there. I relocated there. And so I had long hair, very long hair. It was the 90s. And I wore patent leather shoes, and I wore patent leather pants, and I just was doing my thing, and I wore eyeliner, and I painted my fingernails. And if you're in a very conservative town, let me tell you what doesn't fit in. So I unfortunately was, at the receiving end of homophobic violence, and after that I was like, I'll never ever let anybody else feel this way. So growing up in that environment made me specifically fitted to go into environments like this and talk to people and not be, not necessarily be afraid. And I typically apologize if I appear intimidating. I'm really just a teddy bear. So this is probably one of the most important ones here. Be willing to teach and welcome questions. You're going to hear this overarching theme over and over and over again, because the fact of the matter is people don't know what any of this stuff is. They don't know what it means. They don't even know what an employee resource group is or how to join them. So it's my responsibility to explain to people, and I take that responsibility very seriously, and I've reached quite a few people. Right here, we're going to go back to policies may not reflect the needs of hourly workers. So what are we going to do? Your hourly workforce definitely has different needs as far as policy. How do we resolve that? At Dow, we allow for 12 hours of paid time to be involved in employee resource group meetings, events, whatever. If you are working, your shift will be covered. You can cover your shift so that you can go and participate if it's off-site, if necessary. But that stays within that you got 12 hours of time, and you can use it however you want. Oftentimes, your hourly workforce is going to need to be reminded constantly. And I know that is a little bit of a pain in the ass. I know that. But you have to do it over and over again for two reasons. Number one, we don't have access to a lot of the information as easily, and it's not something we stay up on. And number two, there's a little more turnover in the hourly workforce, especially if you work in somewhere, Target, McDonald's, places with high turnover rates. This 3 months, this quarter we may have an event, and then in the next quarter we have another event, and 50% of your staff may be different. So it's important to say, hey, our policies say that you can participate in this, and this is how you do it. This is how we pay or not pay, or however you do it. But you need to communicate that so that we feel at least, okay, well, at least I know what I can and can't do. Whenever you have steering teams to make policy decisions, everybody has, some of those hourly workers that you wouldn't want a part of this, but you have some that you would. So whenever you're making decisions for adjustments in policy, they started bringing in hourly people and asking, hey, what do you need to do this? What do you need? How does this fit in with you? And some of the policy changes have been so positive for everybody. It's taken workload from some of the people leaders, and it's let us work more safely. Because it's, okay, well, if you're making a policy that's going to apply to me, and you've never been in my shoes and don't know what it is I actually do, that policy may not be helpful. It may actually be a hindrance. It may be a safety hazard. It may cause issues. It's always good to have some input from the people it affects.
And if I can just add on to that a little bit, Stephen, on the previous slide, right, for our policy, the number of hours, right, is that the right number of hours, right? And that's something that we talk about a lot when we're looking at our HR systems and working with our HR partners in terms of how much time to allocate, paid time for participating in an ERG. Because remember, when Stephen goes to participate in an ERG function or something, someone else is covering his shift on overtime. They may or may not want that, right? So it's not a yes or no, it's not a binary answer, right? And that really depends on the organization and the level of participation that any employee has. So if you're looking at updating your HR policies for that, I think it's just a dialogue, especially with plant managers and things like that, what the needs are for the shifts to not burden them.
So this is something I think we all have to recognize in the workplace, and I know you're not supposed to talk about politics in the workplace, but we're going to talk about politics in the workplace. Because that conversation's happening, right? So LGBTQIA, the entire community has been negatively politicized or divisively politicized. Well, we all know who's doing it, but I'm in Texas. I'm definitely aware. So number one, make your story personal, show common ground. The fact is, we have way more in common than we have separate. The most ideologically different people can sit in a room and find 90% of the things are similar. We all want to go to work. We all want to make money. We want to feed our family. We want our kids to do well. We all have these types of things. We all want to live a happy, healthy life. Then you can start finding things. I bet travel. Whatever your hobbies may be. There's this stereotype that the two groups can't have anything in common, and that's just flat out not true. Make your allyship bigger than just our community. And one of our number one collaborations is with the Veterans Network. And that's two groups that tend to be ideologically on the opposite side of the spectrum. I'm speaking broadly. I know that there's a lot of different people and everybody has different ideologies. So broadly speaking, these two groups tend to have separate ideologies and they seem opposite. So what in the world would Veterans Network and the LGBT community, how can we use those two to close the gap. The suicide attempt rate is the same. The PTSD rate is the same. The homelessness rate is the same. The addiction rate is the same. So when you take two communities that seem so far apart and so opposite and show you guys have the same struggles, and your friends and your relatives and your loved ones that are struggling with these things are struggling too. And then you watch some gaps close. You watch people that maybe didn't like each other break out in tears and hug each other. And another thing to understand is that there is peer pressure amongst the hourly workforce to not participate in these things. I know see, I saw your face. I know it's shocking, but it's true. And my hourly workers can back me up on this, that if you start doing that stuff, you're an ass kisser, you're a brown noser. You want to move to staff, don't you? You're just jockeying for a new position. I assure you that I am not.
Stephen, and on that point, on the last slide, with regards to finding commonalities between other ERGs. So 4 years ago, use this as a forum to meet other people. 4 years ago, Major General Tammy Smith was here, and I said, hey, I think there's opportunity to engage with you, have you join a webcast. And talk about your story. When I went to Alan Robinson at the time and said, hey, is this something that the VetNet would be interested in? Just like he couldn't believe that I was able to get a major general, 3-star major general, engaged with the VetNet, right? So you might be helping other ERGs in that journey, right? And it was an incredible dialogue that we had with the general, and absolutely well attended. I think we have over 200, 300 participants on that event. So use your time here wisely. All right. Is this you? Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So, Stephen's going to talk a little bit about messaging, right? So, as a manager, I can, talk about EH&S to my employees because we talk about EH&S all the time. When I try to invite someone on their free time or whatever to come to an ERG, that might not be the same, right? And so having those partnerships with folks in different roles, whether they're foremans or shift supervisors or something like that, is really important to have that that connection. People usually don't listen to half the things I say in the plant, but it's really good. It's really good for me not to be the only one talking. And one thing I wanted to touch on is really around psychological safety. At Dow, we're very proud of our injury and illness rate and our EH&S performance within the company, but really getting to the next level of performance takes more than just what we're doing out in the field and engineered safety. It's really around psychological safety and make sure people are focused on the task at hand and not worried or thinking about something that might be on their mind, whether LGBT or any specific ERG. So definitely relates back to the safety aspect. But Stephen, do you want to tell us a little bit more about delivering messages?
Messaging. This is going to come as a shock to some people. Your immediate supervision might be the wrong choice to invite people to whatever corporate initiative it is. Because I'm going to tell you right now, I haven't always worked in production at Dow. I know. If my immediate supervisor just got onto me because I was 10 minutes late because I had a flat tire, I don't care what your initiative is, I ain't doing it. Your immediate supervision may not be the right choice. The best thing that you can do is find that one hourly worker. The ones that are in this room right now, by the way, would be really good. That'd be a good start. Find an hourly person that has a voice. You know who your people are and you know what they believe and you know if they're an ally or not. Find you an ally, find a member of the LGBT community, find somebody that is in the hourly workforce, pull them aside and say, would you be willing to help us with equality in the workplace? I guarantee you, if you give somebody an opportunity to put their personal passion into their professional life, they're going to do it. That's what happened with me, and I guess I'm doing okay. Start with one-on-one invites. That I can't stress this one enough. Going one-on-one instead of having big group conversations, you remove peer pressure. Okay, so if I pull up on somebody in their office one-on-one when we're working a night shift and we just talk about it, the two of us, boom, they join. So we talked about the hourly rate, about 5%. I've got about 10% of my hourly workforce a member of the LGBT right now. So we're already double, and I want to move that up to 15 to 20 this next year. Easy wins. Everybody knows there's a few people that'll be easy to win over. So if you conduct those one-on-ones with the people that you know are going to join, that you know are going to participate, start there and then let it go wider, right? I understand as supervisors, you can't necessarily single somebody out, but a hourly peer can. How are we engaging with these employees? Again, see that, I told y'all that was going to pop up again. Listening and being open, understand that there's going to be ignorance in previous engagements are going to bias conversation and participation. You're going to get some people that just don't want to be a part of it. And honestly, getting hourly employees to be a part of an ERG is harder than getting people to say, okay, the LGBT community is not a bunch of sinners. You know, whatever, that barrier. You know that barrier, right? The rainbow barrier that I'm talking about? Okay, all right, good. I figured I didn't have to go too much into that one, but. So this refers back to the DE&I feeling non-inclusive because, you know, we're just not being talked to. So that's something to keep in mind. Now I want to talk about using the term shop floor. I've heard it here for years and years and years. The term shop floor, when someone says it to us, I automatically am like, oh, nah, we're done. It shuts me down because I know where the term shop floor came from. And there's some people that do. Shop floor refers to during the Industrial Revolution when the manufacturing floor was down and the salaried people were up and they would look down and grade us and overlook us. So whenever people come and say, okay, well, I want to hit the guys on the shop floor, I don't work in a shop. I work in a manufacturing facility. So I don't know, call it something else. I just wanted to throw this in there while I had the floor to kind of help everybody out. Yeah, see, my hourly people know what I'm talking about. Of course you don't know it's a divisive term because no one told you, but I'm telling you, so now you know. People are going to resist leadership in the corporate agenda, so whatever, no matter how much it may benefit the hourly workforce, you're going to have some people that are going to resist it. 27% of your workforce wants nothing to do with an LGBT ERG. That same 27% wants nothing to do with any employee resource group. They would rather not work wherever it is they work, and they swear it's the worst job on the planet. It ain't, but they swear it is. Again, keep in mind, remember who's delivering the message. By all means, please try to get an hourly person. Now here's the dirty word. Here's the dirty word, union. So in 2006, Ford Motor Company was going bankrupt, and they got a new CEO, and I memorized his name last week, and now I forgot. He came in, and when it was time to turn the company around, he pulled all of the senior leadership, the C-suite and all that, but you know what else he did? He pulled the union senior executives in, and they had a big meeting together, and then Ford had 19 profitable straight quarters. 19 straight profitable quarters. So most of us have the same priorities, and if you're not union, I'm not trying to say we should all organize. That is not the point. I'm saying use the tools you have at hand. One of the things that I've done as a union representative is we took the NDL, the non-discrimination language, and we started passing this legal language off to other sites and other places that don't have the resources, but they are unionized in red states specifically to give the LGBT community non-discrimination language where they don't have state protections so that they can have this. And now we're starting to add trans-affirming healthcare into some of those healthcare plans and stuff. So use the tools you have available. That's all I'm advocating for. So I just want to be clear so that somebody doesn't throw me out of here. All I'm saying is use your tools.
And that was you and I on opposite sides of the table during negotiation.
Yeah.
Saying, why don't we have different non-discrimination language in the union contract, why don't we make it more expansive to what we already have as a company, right?
Yes.
And then you in your role, with the union, expanding that to other contract negotiations, things like that, for companies that might not have as positive LGBT cultures as we have it now.
And that has gone all over the country now. So that's outside of one union. That's gone outside, and it's even gone into other companies in the areas where they're not union. So we're starting to see some of that ripple effect take place, where people are getting protections from companies because they have to keep up with the hiring practices of these other ones, and they've got to offer the same sort of protections. Because they don't, they're behind. It's all it takes is one. It's like throwing a rock into the middle of a lake, and that ripple effect touches everything. So now we're going to talk about cultural differences. I'm trying to get through here because I know we're going to have some questions, and I'm running out of time. So hourly personnel work and leave, right? They come to work, they go home. They don't have email and calendars on our personal device. Okay, I do, but not everybody does. I got a few roles. Some will never want to work a single minute of overtime. That's back to that 27%. They don't want anything to do. They don't want to be there for a single minute longer than they have to. And you know what? That's okay. Don't waste your time on them. Some are going to want to work the overtime. Some are going to want to participate in these programs. Some want to do the extra and go the extra mile. There's your ones and twos and threes that you need to focus on. A lot of us hourly folks, as soon as we leave the facility, we don't think about it. I don't go home and open and check emails and work on my report because I don't have reports, to be honest with you, but that's the way it works. We leave and we're done. That is a really important one to understand, because it's going to be trying to close that and have people involved when they would usually maybe be somewhere else. So we're going to start talking about some of the more uncomfortable parts now. Well, not for this room, but they tend to focus on the past versus the future. They have a Norman Rockwell type of mentality. The past is better. It's always better. It's human nature to romanticize the past. There's 8 million psychological studies on that. I think we all pretty well understand that. But that's especially prevalent in the hourly workforce when you take into account the type of information that the hourly workforce is getting. What can you do about this? Reach them by using historical facts. Use what it is they want to. How about the history of LGBT people in the military? They like to watch, I know that a lot of the guys around me really like to watch like war movies and World War II and Vietnam. So when I started saying, hey, well, check this out, it started to kind of play into that romanticized historical love, and they were like, oh man, I didn't even know that. Gotcha. The hourly workforce tends to lean politically to the right, and they tend to be more religious. I am not making this up. This is not a generalized statement. It is generalized because I'm in the hourly workforce, and I'm telling you right now, well, I don't got to tell you. So Vanderbilt University did a study, a major study, starting in the year 2018, because the prevalent thinking was that the blue-collar workers swung hard to vote for a specific candidate in 2016. And I think we all know who that candidate was, but here's what they found. That didn't happen. It was actually a slow progression towards that, starting in 1992. So from 1992 all the way up until about 2016. In 2016, 60% of your hourly workforce stated that they voted a specific way. So what are you going to do about this, right? What are we going to do? Because this is where I hear a lot of the conversations and a lot of the arguments that take place. Try not to use the counterpoints. What I like to advocate is that you learn their argument better than they know it. And you can avoid counterpoints. How do you avoid counterpoints? Instead of coming back with a different point, they'll make a statement that says, yeah, well, the Bible says, and you can say, yes, it does, and. Yes, and. So I'm going to give you all a few references here. Well, I think this. Yes, and. So if you start with yes, and, A, it shows that you might be in agreement, even if you're not. It shows that you at least acknowledge that their point is valid, and then you add on to it, as opposed to saying, yeah, but. You see, because then they go on defensive. Then people get defensive, and your hourly workforce is already leery of all this. They already feel like there's some sort of scary corporate agenda that just literally doesn't exist. But you have to understand that you are competing against information sources that they take in 23, 24 hours a day. It's around the clock. It's political talk radio. It's on the TV the minute they get home. It's social media algorithms that feed more and more and more of the things that they like. And that's what we're really fighting against. Collaborate with other ERGs. They may have things that they agree with, and that'll help establish common ground and interest.
Stephen, I think we helped close the gap a little bit.
I think so.
High five.
We'll take some questions.
I'll let you pick.
You want me to walk over there and you can talk into my
Now
mic?
it's on.
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Yes, I have two kind of comments/questions. I think this was a great session. Agree with everything. I started out as a non-exempt employee in my firm 20 years ago, 19 years ago actually, and there's absolutely a difference in how I was treated and what was exposed to me and what was available and what I could leverage in between those two types of roles I've had. A big difference actually. But it's interesting because I've noticed the concern and fear around using the word union because of the political aspect of it. However, I think that if and I'm making a guess and a generalization here, and anybody can correct me, but I think if you had been from Europe, that might not have been the case, and you may have even put the word class in the title of this session, because that's really what this is about. This is about, entrenching those class-based differences, and calling it out sometimes takes the power away from it, or at least I hope so. And then my second thing is more of a question. What do you do to engage hourly workers when your industry has decided to outsource them? I mean, I work with people every day who are a part of the LGBT plus community at the tech site that I'm the DEI for the Technology Center in Delaware in my company, and a lot of the people who I know are LGBT plus are people who work in my cafeteria, for example, but I can't bring them in because we've decided that kind of worker can go work for some other company. And I see that as a problem, and I don't really know what to do about that.
Yeah, so, if anyone has anything in the room specific to that, but, we have, for example, a lot of Kelly employees. A lot of our folks that work in the plant are Kelly employees. We might have SGS contractors and things like that in the plant. We do allow them to register for the ERG at the company. They can sign up, be part of our mailing list and things like that, come to events and whatnot. So that's how we try to include them and bring them into the fold, especially if they're nested contractors, Zachary folks that are doing maintenance work in the plant. I don't know if that kind of answers your question, but we do have them include that those folks in our distribution lists and communications. They're able to call in to meetings and things like that.
We have one question from the virtual audience. The question is, you said you give your folks 12 hours to participate in ERGs, but what period is that for? Month, quarter, year?
That's, I think, an annual, 12 hours annual. And then there's also different, that's not the only segment, right? We have, I think, 16 hours of volunteer community support. We have 4 or 8 hours of civic duty. 8 hours of civic duty. So there's a bunch of different aspects, right? We have that in there. That's, I would say, a minimum, right? And Stephen, as example, he participates a lot in the United Way campaigns and things like that. So he works with his leader to make sure that he has the time needed to do that, right? A lot of the folks, I would say, on the salaried side might not even have the time to participate, right? And he's willing to contribute that time. So why wouldn't we allow that? Do you want to, you pick?
We'll go him and then we'll get her.
Hi, Paul Briscoe, he, him, Dell Technologies. I think the 12-hour allotment is great for the hourly employees. I'm curious what procedures. I'll have two things. It'll be real quick. Are there any policies in place to kind of streamline that process? I'm imagining inertia from those managers having to replace someone on that shift at that time. And are there any like policies or incentives for them to be supportive leaders for those hourly employees that are wanting to take those hours that are allotted to them?
So we control our own schedule. I don't have to ask a leader for approval. I put it on the schedule, and we schedule our own people. We manage our own schedule. So we are required by law to have a minimum of 5 people, and somebody has to be qualified on each job. So as long as that is being met, there's no intervention, nothing like that, because all that comes from global. So it's here's your approved time, and we can use it to come in on our off time, or I just put in the little schedule thing. Hey, I need coverage for an ERG event, and then they cover it. I mean, it's no more complicated than that. But not everybody manages their own schedule like that. So this is something they would have to adapt from firm to firm.
Yeah, and we also have basically incentives for everybody in our performance award, our bonuses, right? In terms of, how you get to, 100% of your bonus, right? A component of that is around inclusion and diversity. So a leader would it would behoove themselves to, encourage people that are interested in being parts of the ERGs.
Another question from the virtual audience. Any advice on engaging contracted coworkers when we are very restricted in how we can interact with them outside our primary jobs?
So he's asking how do they interact with their contractors when they are restricted about what kind of conversations they can have with them? I don't know that I could answer that other than saying they are going to have to work with their HR people and let them know that, listen, we're missing an opportunity here, and either we're inclusive or we're not. And if we are, we need to come up with a policy that allows us to engage with our contractors. Here, she's been waiting.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Cogley, she. My question is about unions. I'll say the word out loud.
Thank you.
We're a union biomanufacturing site, and when we've talked about volunteer time off, paid volunteer time off, or BRGs, management always says, oh, it didn't come up in negotiations, or the union focused on other outcomes that they wanted to focus on. And I want to say, but management, it's good for you to have this. How do you engage, how do you convince management to proactively bring these topics to the table and have it be a bargaining chip from the management side rather than the other way around?
Yeah, I mean, so that you're not the only one that has those type of conversations. I'll just say that. But I think it's a two-way street, right? I definitely advocate for that stuff, especially ahead of contract negotiations. But that can be a barrier. I'll just acknowledge it, right? And has been. But along the, in between negotiations, we have a plant union committee, of which Stephen and I are both participated in when we talk about these different topics. So, I mean, that might be a letter of agreement or something outside of the contract negotiation that you're able to help facilitate. But I would say it should be a topic of conversation, something you continue to bring up. And if you need any help with management in your company on the why it's important, just have them reach out to me. I'll talk about it. Happy to help. I don't know.
Here, get somebody from the back, because they always get ignored in all my sessions that I see.
Their hands are like, wait.
Which one?
The guy waving his hand around. Oh, there's 2 of them. Keep going. That one.
Hey, Robert Charlton with Nissan, he, him. So your presentation was about the hourly employees and their ERGs. Do you allow management to also be a part of the hourly employee ERGs, or are they separate?
It's one ERG. The whole idea was to bring and have one ERG, because that in itself is inclusive. The idea was floated at one point, well, let's have an hourly ERG and a salary ERG, and that is literally the opposite of inclusion.
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah, we're talking about trying to get more hourly people involved in a single employee resource group so that you have more mixing and interacting of different work groups.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
We do have what are called IFL networks and
Yes.
different, it's more like mentorship than it is an ERG. But, we do have different type of mentorship programs. The IFL network, Influential Leader Network is one of them.
All right, let's get her.
You gonna make them run all around?
I am.
In the front?
Yeah, right up here in the front. She was agreeing with me a lot while I was talking, so.
Hello, my name's Megan, she, her pronouns. I was wondering if there were any strategies or programs that were really beneficial towards making employees feel like they were a part of a strong community outside of events, especially if they only have an hour and maybe they belong to multiple communities, so they're already splitting their time. Thank you.
Oh, okay, so you had to ask me a hard one. A lot of times the volunteer stuff that we do outside of work, you can put together volunteer programs. That allows people to gather outside of work. Sometimes we'll have a happy hour type of thing that's, people go to, obviously they go to off the clock. You can't go there and consume alcohol on the clock, but you can go and it's an outside of the work type of thing, builds more communities. The WhatsApp groups. Depending on the size of your company, some of them, a Facebook group may be something that be beneficial.
And just to give an example of really a success story that we've had within the company. So about 4 years ago, one of my operators came to me and said, my FRC don't fit, my flame retardant clothing, my uniform for the company that Cintas provides us doesn't fit. It's fitted for men, not women. And so, it was a partnership that we had with Cintas to really drive that home that we need to get fitted FRC. So it might not be, just the LGBT community that, we work with, but that was definitely something that was impactful to the shift employees, and that was not being addressed. So we worked proactively with Cintas to make sure we got different custom fitted FRC and expanded our options with them.
He has had his hand up, and I can see that his arm is going to go numb here pretty soon.
Run back and forth.
And then we'll get you.
Thank you. Jake Luker, he, him, with the Eli Lilly and Company. One of the hourly employees here. Woohoo! I implore every manager, HR person here, who that's what most of this group is, somehow management, HR, something or another, grab some operator, bring them along. That's all it takes. I'm here, I go back to the shop floor, I have credibility. You might not. That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Right there. I'm sorry for making you run around, but
Cardio.
the hands are where they are.
Today.
Hi.
Hello.
I had to write my thing down because I have a lot of things to say. Hi, my name is Sarah Clausen. My pronouns are she, her. I work for L3 Harris Technologies. I first just really want to say thank you so much for having this session. As another person who started a local ERG and became a site lead while working as a technician on the manufacturing floor and as an hourly employee, I was most excited for this session. There were 3 that I was really excited for, but this was one of them. Thank you so much for just speaking about this. Thank you for all the hard work that you've done and continue to do so, for gathering all of this information. It makes me feel extremely validated and seen and respected. And you have succinctly and expertly been able to say all of the things that I've wanted to say to my enterprise leadership board and to my corporate leaders. And anyway, so my questions were, I guess you already answered some of them in the references slide, I think, but where are you getting the statistics from in the quick stats slide, and how are you measuring productivity? But you might have answered that in this slide here. So then also, if you could potentially go back to the slide of the 2 languages of inclusion, because I didn't get a photo of it. And also, does your leadership team, or do you get more time to plan events? I know that there's the 12 hours allocated, but it doesn't take as much time, in my opinion, to participate in an event as it does to plan and reserve the space and send invitations and make flyers and post them in the spaces necessary and make sure that you're going around to each employee individually and talking to them, because again, you don't have that kind of time.
That 12 hours. Okay. I'll meet you right over here. Because you got a lot, I got a lot, yeah. Thank you guys so much for being here. We're out of time. I genuinely, I appreciate it from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, Alex.